1928, when Hitler ran for office, he got 2.5% of the vote. All of a sudden, the Depression happens, and the next thing you know, the German capitalist class starts backing Hitler, okay? Now, they were not looking to kill any Jews. Hitler might have been thinking that. We know he was thinking that. But they weren't. All they were looking for was a commie basher. The model they had was Mussolini, okay, who was not anti-Semitic. But, you know, all right, Hitler's anti-Semitic, all right, so what, you know. But they were looking for a commie basher. They were not looking to kill Jews. In fact, they were worried that Hitler was too anti-Semitic and they would lose trade with Jewish businessmen all over the world, okay? But when the capitalist class backs the resident right-wing fanatics against the godless atheistic commies, okay, they think they are using the fanatic against the communists. But the fanatic thinks they're using the capitalists against the communists, okay? So what literally happened, I mean, that's the best analogy that I can give you. In other words, none of the Americans involved were thinking about taking away the rights of women that they had under the Stalinist regime, but they were looking for a commie basher. Only the commie bashers, when they came to power, they said, thank you very much. What happened was when they came to power, that confirmed in their minds that they were Allah's disciples on earth. And now that we're the disciples on earth, now we can look around for somebody else to mess over with, okay? Now, what really began to happen was that in 1991, if you recall, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, okay? And again, the United States had backed Saddam Hussein against the Islamic fundamentalists in Iran during the Iraq-Iran war, okay? But when their guy, who they provided him with all kinds of, you know, intelligence, CIA intelligence about what was going on in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. But when their guy invaded Kuwait, they had to back the Kuwaiti despots against Saddam Hussein on the same principle as I mentioned before. If your guy, one of your despots, is under attack from anybody, if you don't back him, then all the other despots will say, oh my God, they'll do the same thing if I get into trouble. So the United States backed Kuwait against Saddam Hussein. And as part of that, the Saudis brought in 10,000 American soldiers into Saudi Arabia. And that's what made bin Laden and his element realize, aha, now we're getting the picture. We went off to Afghanistan to fight in a jihad against the godless atheists, the communists, but we didn't realize that we were nothing but puppets of the Americans. But now that we realize, we go after them. Okay? That's literally the evolution of that kind of thing. Now, again, I emphasize, when the Americans backed the fundamentalists in Afghanistan, they were not trying to take away any women's rights. But de facto, they did, okay? And that includes the newspapers say, I mean, when I say the newspapers, I'm talking about the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Number one, they say 92% of all the heroin in the world is produced in Afghanistan, and that it's produced by two rival gangs, the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan, okay? Which is, of course, supported by the President of the United States, who used to snort cocaine, all right? I mean, you know, I mean, I'm not making this up. There's no argument about these facts. I mean, the New York Times repeats the business about drugs and Karzai's brother being the, you know, the major distributor, daily. It's reached that level. I mean, daily, because I clip all the articles on Afghanistan out of the papers. I mean, it just every day and you know, they don't give any evidence, which means they're certain of it. In other words, they are taking the responsibility for saying it, if you follow what I mean. In other words, you know, somebody told them, you know, Karzai's chauffeur or somebody like that, you know, and they don't reveal who it was, but they are saying, we say so, you know, and both the Times and the Wall Street Journal insist on reform. Okay. Connected directly to Afghanistan, the United States is now debating, the Obama administration is now debating what to do with Afghani heroin, okay? Because they find that if you go after the farmer growing, the peasant growing the poppies, you make an enemy of the peasant, okay? So they're now talking about what we'll do is we'll use drones, you know, drone rockets to shoot at the convoys. And of course, immediately the ACLU says, wait a minute, you're killing people from an airplane. Number one, you're liable to kill innocent civilians, but number two, how do you know that the guys who somebody told you is smuggling heroin is smuggling heroin? All right? So, I mean, you know, I could give you more and more of these exotic details, but you get the picture. Basically, all that they have to do to wipe out the illegal heroin traffic from Afghanistan is buy the poppies from the peasant. The American government, if it bought the poppies from the peasants and turned it into heroin and then gave it to drug addicts, you would be a big step, a giant step, towards the solution of the heroin problem. Because what you want to do with addicting drugs is you want to bring the addict as close as possible to the doctors. You want to bring him close to the authorities if you want to solve the problem of heroin addiction. Because if you bring him closer, then you can put him under some program and eventually he gives up his addiction. You get my point. I mean, you have country after country that has tried that, and it works better than illegal heroin. I mean, there's no dispute over that. I mean, you just can't talk about, let's put it this way, you can't talk about heroin without talking about Afghanistan, but you can't talk about Afghanistan without talking about heroin. So